Welcome to yet another episode of the Two Fish at the Table Poker Podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Legend of Venom Poker Stars.
And I am one of your other hosts, East Coast Sam. Welcome. I'm very excited for this episode. Ben and I have been talking a little bit behind the scenes about this one. Yeah, I think we're both really sort of pumped to talk about this material we've got.
Yes, so our special April 1st episode of the podcast, we'll be discussing the short-lived G4 TV television program, 2 months, 2 million, a 10-episode, one-season show that covers the ups and downs of 4 young upstart online poker players in 2009 trying to make $2 million over the course of 2 months. And so for the next hour and a half, let's get into it.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much to go into. I mean, right off the bat, I mean, we can really talk about reality television at this point because, you know, both Ben and I grew up during the golden era of reality television.
April Fools, everybody, we will also be discussing the 2015 World Series of Poker main event, the first half, as well in this special April Fool's edition of the Two Fish at the Table podcast.
We got you. Even though we promised last time we were going to talk about 2015, I bet we fooled you there.
Anyway, so we'll cover 2 months, 2 million, then we'll go into the 2015 main event. So we grew up on reality television. I grew up on the show Survivor, you know, more of a reality competition kind of show, Amazing Race, The Mole, list goes on and on. I also grew up, you know, in my teenage years watching a little channel called G4, a gaming channel, mostly, you know, a couple of shows in particular. And even though I was, you know, in the poker brain space at times during that time period, I had no idea that this show, 2 months, 2 million, ever existed until years after G4, the channel closing down, and just seeing the, you know, Wikipedia and whatnot pages of the history of G4 and all the programs. And I was like, wait a minute, 2 months, 2 million. And so I actually found this entire program on YouTube in one big 3.5 hour video with all 10 episodes, and I thought it was, you know, a fun little show. I wanted to let my co-host Sam take a crack at watching it, and thought it would be good to talk about it.
Yeah, I mean, you know, as I was mentioning in terms of reality television, I mean, we watched a lot of the big shows. We watched pretty much all the big shows except like Keeping Up with the Kardashians. Like we watched, you know, Survivor, Big Brother, all that. And then a lot of smaller shows. I mean, keep in mind that reality television was so cheap to produce at this point. You could just, you know, change channel to any channel and there would be a reality show on it. You know, the Christian Broadcasting Network had reality shows on it. And I bring all that up because I don't enjoy 2 months, 2 million as like straight entertainment. I don't enjoy it as like, oh, I know so much about poker now. What I enjoy it as is an encapsulation of this time period of television that I'm kind of nostalgic for, you know, just being 10 years old, turning on the television and watching, you know, Celebrity Fat Camp with Dustin Diamond or something. You know, it's like, it just encapsulates the like low quality, low budget sort of vibe of reality television at this point, as well as G4. Ben and I both used to watch X-Play, Attack of the Show. There was this really bad game show on G4 called Hurl, which was the contestants would do competitive eating. They eat a bunch of food really, really quick and then go on like amusement park rides. And there'd be like 3 rounds and each contestant, the contestants who threw up would be eliminated. Like that's what this reminds me of, just this like low budget, just, you know, fart it in your sleep and just get it out on television sort of reality television. So I enjoyed it ironically, not as sort of straight entertainment.
I like it a bit more as entertainment because I think it kind of hits into the 4 guys that sort of impractical jokers, 4 friends ripping on each other, you know, and it kind of reminded me of like an extended the nuts segment from the main event segments, because you had some of these, you know, side bets galore. You had just these poker, subplots, and, you know, it's just these 4 kind of goofballs that are kind of, they think they're so badass and cool, but they're really like dorky. And it's this great sort of yin-yang contrast that is constantly on display. And while character development's not exactly top priority in this kind of show, there's, you know, hints at it here and there. And it, you know, and it's kind of fun to watch this sort of up and down progression of this summer because, you know, I watched this kind of binge watch these, but I could imagine if I had been, you know, 16, 17 watching G4, I'd be happy to tune in the next week and see, you know, which way the poker needle would go up for these guys, because these guys are 4, you know, they're very different poker players, even though
right,
the actual poker gameplay is not the top priority or even the second priority of this show. You get enough of a vibe of how these four guys differ from each other as far as their approach to online poker and the poker world. So I thought it works on a few levels, and I think it's honestly a pretty perfect show for the the demographic and the vibe that G4 was always trying to go for with its non-video game specific content.
Yeah, I mean, G4, their demographic was, sort of teenagers, people in their 20s, who like, girls and cars and beer and stuff. I'm suppose I'm the demographic, I'm in my mid 20s who are supposed to like this show. And I'm just looking
Happy birthday, by the way.
Happy birthday. It was my birthday a couple days ago. I'm supposed to be, I suppose, the target audience for this, and yet watching the show, I'm like, don't you guys go to sleep? I mean, don't you guys read a book or like have a salad or something? It really seems like just from how you see these guys play, they like play poker for 2 hours, and then they go car shopping, and then they go to the club, and they're up until like midnight, and they like try to pick up girls, but they fail miserably. Like none of them pick up any girls throughout the whole series. It's like
Danny a little bit.
Danny a little bit at the Connect 4 tournament of all places, but it's yeah. I mean, I don't admire these guys or anything. Again, there's just sort of an ironic level of enjoyment in terms of it.
So basically, getting into the formula for this show, the first episode sets the premise up. The introduction of the show actually has the kind of generic G4 announcer voice guy saying, these four math wizards in high school are taking on Las Vegas. They're four of the best poker players in the world. And their plan is to make $2 million in 2 months. And really, that introduction kind of sets a sort of false expectation in your head of what kind of these are not Daniel Negreanu types or anything. These are kind of these goofball, these nerdy laughs and just, they kind of they kind of fail in front of girls and stuff, and even though they're supposedly these top online pros, they lose. Kind of they have more losing sessions, like big losing sessions and big winning sessions. We'll break down each four of their poker arcs in this show, but the introduction sets up the premise, and each episode, is interspersed with sessions of them playing poker, along with, them out having parties, spending money, meeting people, trying to respond to past pranks or past jokes from episodes previous, or trying to, something happened this past episode, so we're going to do this to address that. This is a fair amount of continuity. I kind of appreciate that when you're consider that you could kind of watch these episodes in almost any order, and you wouldn't be able to get the steady sort of A to Z flow than if you watch them in order.
Yeah, I mean, just to be clear, we both binged through this. I watched the first episode at 1x speed, and then I watched the rest at 2x speed, more or less in order. And yeah, I mean, the episodes did fly by pretty quickly. I mean, we're talking about 22-minute episodes here. They would be commercial breaks, but they try to have like little cliffhangers where they're like, oh, what's going to happen in this hand? Oh, and then before, the river gets dealt out, they cut to commercial to try to build tension, little things like that. And yeah, there is definitely continuity in terms of the players they encounter. There's this guy, Blue Job, who gives the players a headache, and they sort of mention, as the summer goes on, they're trying to figure these players out. That's sort of where I think the continuity and the story building shines a little bit, when they can sort of talk about working with previous players, and then big name players like Tom Dwan and Chewy and other players come into the story, and they try gambling with them and hanging out with them, and that sort of helps build their narratives a little bit better. That's sort of where.
At the end of each episode, each of the four guys tally up how much money they made or lost that week, and then the one who did the worst does a penalty stunt, very much in the vein of Kenny versus Spenny or Impractical Jokers, some sort of public shameful kind of act. And some of them are pretty funny and kind of unique. Some of them kind of remind me of, again, some of those punishments or humiliations of those other shows. And ironically, Emil, one of the four guys, avoids doing any of them the entire season. Pretty impressive. And then Danny Stern kind of gets off to a slow start and does the first couple of them. And from there, it's just pretty much all Jay until Ryan does one. But, some of them, they're pretty funny, and they're pretty quick. They're like the last, 2 minutes or so. The episode just kind of ends on the tail end of a quote from that stunt from one of the guys, like, you're pretty good as a girl in a dress, and then just goes right to credits.
Well, I mean, you bring up Kenny versus Spenny and Impractical Jokers, which are both, reality shows that we both like. And again, there is that premise of a humiliation at the end. But in those shows, they actually like really feel like humiliations. Like in Kenny versus Spenny, one of them gets spanked by the guy's mom, and they have to like take their tongue scraping and like put it on the guy's tongue. Like it's actually like really gross humiliations. These humiliations here just feel very tame. Like they go out dressed as a girl, or, one of them has to go out on stage and do stand-up, but he actually does a good job doing stand-up and gets laughter and stuff.
Well, there was one where Danny had to go into a gross pool covered in like blue-green algae.
That was bad.
And get cards out of the pool. That was definitely more of a punishment, if you ask me.
Yeah, but the other ones weren't that much of a punishment.
Well, it's all about kind of spinning a negative into a positive. You got to have the right attitude. It's kind of like how they get over a big swing in poker. You kind of just have to make it, spin it around and make it work for you.
Mm-hmm. And
so the actual 4 players. So again, we have Danny Stern, who other poker TV fans might know from The Big Game.
Right.
And, some infamous Phil Hellmuth, Danny Stern rivalry there. Jay Rosenkrantz. I don't think he's really popped up anywhere in the poker TV sphere really besides this show.
Yeah,
Emil Patel and Brian Roberts, who we more recently discussed in the 2014 main event and making it to the final 3 tables.
Right.
One of his big claims to fame semi-recently. I mean, these guys, for the most part, are not really in the poker world making any, recent cashes in tournaments. I'm sure they're still playing poker to some capacity nowadays, but probably moved on. As again, this show aired in 2009. So again, this is pre Full Tilt scandal, but post 07 Black Friday. So kind of that online poker bubble where this was still kind of kosher across a lot of America before things obviously changed up. And really each episode, I kind of, you can kind of break down to a couple of special, events or things that happen in the episode. Episode 1, for example, they have to assess who gets what bedroom in this giant mansion that they rent. And so they play a little poker game to determine who gets who. And, so little things like that. And one of the common complaints about why the foursome was ultimately unsuccessful in hitting their goal was that they were just so distracted doing all these other things, which I guess, partially is because they're doing a TV show. So they have to have content that's not just dedicated towards, playing poker in the war room, which is kind of a cool little spot in the mansion where they had their computers all set up for their long poker sessions. But again, each episode kind of is, they're very similar in formula, but they're doing something different to try to keep things exciting for them and hopefully for the audience at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, you're definitely right. I mean, they're definitely staging, going out to nightclubs and doing these humiliations and stuff for television. And it really just does feel in an episode because, we talked, the poker commentary really just amounts to, the player going, I had pocket tens, this guy had ace, 6, the flop came out, just very sort of cursory stuff. And, the poker, a poker hand takes 5 seconds in this show. Whereas, as we mentioned with the WSOP, they've been actually expanding the hand longer and longer, so you get a sense of drama and you get a sense of how each player is thinking and what their bet sizes are and so on. So it's just kind of like night and day. I mean, if you're trying to learn about poker from these guys, who again, 4 top professionals at this time, you really just don't get a good sense of what their playing styles are, let alone anything about the game on any sort of advanced level or anything. Unless you get these big reactions of, he rivered a straight on me, which is, again, kind of funny. I mean, it happens like a couple of times an episode, there's one of those hands. But, I just wish that there was a little bit more detail and substance to the poker here than just, I had this hand, he had that hand, and he won.
And, I hear you there, but I also recognize how with television, you have to sacrifice certain principles in order to have something translate appropriate to the small screen, and at the same time, this episode, one episode after was dedicated towards them holding a poker boot camp where they they found some kind of disciples to train up. And even though you were not necessarily learning with them in that episode, it opens up the audience to the idea of poker schools, poker teachers do exist. And so if this intrigues you in this television episode, okay, maybe you can look into it on your own and see if it works for you. So in that respect, that still is a valid alternative for me.
Yeah, I mean that's fine, except the training camp seems to be, you know, throwing water balloons at each other and then going out in a nightclub. I mean, the cringiest moment I think of the whole show for me was they have this guy who's just graduated high school and he's, you know, a top millionaire, but he's 18 years old, so he can't go into the nightclub. So they left him in the party bus by himself for like I don't know how long, and then eventually they'd like send a couple girls out to him, but like they just left him there. Like, go to a restaurant or something where you can all hang out. I don't get that.
I don't know. I think the cringe factor was worse with when these guys do a house versus house battle and go to a nightclub.
Oh, yeah.
Try to complete 3 tasks with some ladies at the club, and the ultimate outcome is who ends up cleaning their poker house as the punishment. But Lucky Chewy is about as cringe, like awkward high school kid, like for the first time meeting a girl in public. As possible when they have to do these ridiculous challenges, like getting a girl to do a push-up or getting them to buy them a drink or getting them to take their underwear off for them. Like just this disgusting, awful thing that they're like, oh, I see I have this photo that you just gave me. Like it's just the most cringe of the whole season, if you ask me.
Yeah, I mean, he's still around too. I mean, he's, you know, he says lines like, you know, I think they were like planning a party at some point. It might not have been in that episode, but a different episode. And he's like, oh, well, we're not going to have any fat chicks at our party. And it's like, oh God, like, so just doesn't age well. It's so cringy.
But the most cringe laugh in the entire season of this show is Emil Patel's laugh, where he's just like, it's just the dorkiest laugh I've ever heard in my life.
It's a great laugh.
Yes, and I will say it almost made up for in one episode where Emil poses as a prince from Dubai to try to pick up girls, and then Brian refers, oh, he's trying to use the Dubai bit again to get a dinner date. It's just really disgusting, really funny though to me.
Yeah, I mean, it's just all the stuff with women in this is just cringe, just frankly.
I agree, a different time. But getting into, my favorite episode of this show, maybe for a dumb reason, is episode 8, where the guys decide to go on to a 36-hour lockdown, which means they literally stay in the war room and don't leave for 36 straight hours. I guess one guy's allowed to leave at a time to go to the bathroom, get some food, whatever, and then come back in. And they have a little timer inside the war room that every hour it goes off, and then they all yell, "Lockdown!"
Yeah, that was a pretty good episode. They set up tents inside the lockdown room so that they can just sleep. They have their personal chef, who we haven't mentioned thus far, just cooking them food and stuff. Seems like a cool guy. And they have
their personal assistant, who they hired in episode 2 through a little audition process, try to pull up curtains inside the room, which really have no purpose because the light is wearing eye mask. You don't need that to keep the light out. And then additionally, bouncing off the lockdowns plot line, Jay ends up in this crazy sort of rivalry episode poker showdown with Viffer, where he ends up finding this sort of poker tell kind of rounders, Teddy KGB style, and he ends up, despite being down about $250,000 at one point in a heads-up online showdown, ends up going on a huge tear and exploiting him for $351,000 profit for that session. And that's really where the majority of their total profit of the entire season came from, was that one week for Jay in that episode. So it amounted to a pretty enjoyable episode, and I just love the constant lockdown announcements as the episode goes on.
Yeah, what would be my favorite episode? I mean, episode 7 with the charity event is pretty funny. A charity Connect 4 tournament, and for whatever reason, they decided to hire some rappers to make a rap song. The rap song is kind of it's okay.
It's not bad. It's better than Claude Freeman or something.
Yeah, and I'd say the boot camp, just in terms of a character level, it's interesting to hear, these young guys who they're sort of, trying to train, talk about the game. And one of them's like, I don't have a plan. I'm just going to kind of just take poker for as long as I can, make as much money as possible. And the show kind of pauses for a moment, kind of almost indicts him. The other players are kind of saying you need to have a plan. You need to have a future for this. You can't just, throw yourself into the wind and hope you make a bunch of money. So it's just kind of interesting how they sort of explored that premise for a brief moment.
I mean, a couple other highlights of the season. I did enjoy the heads up house versus house poker show. And it was like they did best of like 5 matches, and it came down to sudden death, and that was kind of cool. And the final episode, there was this amusing power computer outage while the guys are playing poker.
Right.
And so you can imagine they're playing these thousands of dollars, pots, and all of a sudden the power goes out, and they get so pissed off. It's pretty intense. As you think about it, that's the kryptonite of playing online poker. Is all it takes is one cord goes out unplugged from the outlet, and all of a sudden you're screwed.
Yeah, and Emil had been sort of like the even-keeled guy, as we mentioned. He didn't do any penalty stunts, didn't get like huge earnings, but he'd been, very sort of even-keeled while playing. So to see him kind of freak out a little bit was kind of a fun moment.
I mean, yeah, speaking to the point of kind of going over all 4, Emil was the slowest. I think he played the lowest stakes of the 4 of them.
Yeah.
While he was prone to the fewest swings, it's mentioned how he's kind of the guy who kind of waits for the nuts. He doesn't overplay. I think he plays PLO, and that kind of allows you to pick your spots a bit better because it's easier to get the nuts when you have more cards in your starting hand. And I even know Emil did have a couple of losing weeks. The losses were relatively small, and he was a pretty consistent, like 20K, 30K, 15K kind of guy every episode.
Right.
Jay was kind of the big gun. He had the biggest swings and the biggest games that included the huge swing against Viffer, and he was also their bell cow for the live home game that they held in episode 9.
Mm-hmm.
And he was up pretty big, 406,000 for the whole summer, which again, if all 4 guys had done something in that ballpark, that's still pretty close to the 2 million goal altogether. But again, he definitely lost his confidence early in the first half of the season. He was losing pretty regularly, and actually flies home for one episode just to kind of refresh his head and get some perspective. And that was as close to a character arc really as any of the 4 main guys really had.
Yeah.
In the season. So it stands out, whether that's a positive or a negative. Either way, it does stand out for him. What are your thoughts about Danny and Brian?
Danny and Brian. Yeah, I mean, they're just sort of interesting customers. I mean, I told you this before, but it's hard for me to tell the 4 guys apart, frankly. They all just kind of blur together. They're just sort of, these supposedly cool guys you're supposed to admire in the context of the show. I mean, again, I'm sure they're better poker players than I am, but yeah, I mean, it is sort of interesting to, when we do hear about their personal lives a little bit more, like, Brian's sort of relationship with his girlfriend, how he kind of doesn't really want to buy a house. He isn't really too sure what that relationship's going to look like. That sort of comes up in episode 3 toward the start of the series. I mean, that's kind of interesting. I wish there'd just been a little bit more of those moments so I can tell them apart a little bit more about their playing style. But yeah, I mean, all the guys, again, are like, they do have interesting moments here and there in the story. It's just at the end, I just really don't feel their character arcs, that there really are character arcs that are fleshed out.
I mean, I'm with you there. I think Brian was the most prone to the old expression, all bark and no bite.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Kind of talks the biggest game, and really he put up mediocre at best numbers. He was barely up on the whole summer, by far the least successful of the 4 of them numbers-wise. He was able to avoid the penalty stunts for the most part. He often would lose, but not lose as much as, say, Donnie or Jay would. So he would kind of luck out in that respect. And Danny, he was kind of inconsistent as well. Maybe slightly less inconsistent than Jay.
Yeah.
And his numbers, he was still, losing pretty heavily in the first half and kind of fought back into it in the second half. But again, he ranked 3rd of the foursome as far as profit for the summer. In the end, they had about 680 something thousand or so of the 2 million. So again, not that a little over 1/3 of the goal, which is not great, but it's still a tidy sum. I mean, considering their expenses for the whole summer, they probably broke even for the whole summer. So. And supposedly, Jay Rosencrantz has since spoken about this after the fact, is that the show is not taken up for a second season. Jay thinks it was related to the network being kind of cheap, not wanting to put some money into a show, which again I can believe, because G4 didn't have the best track record with its programming, both its original programming and its treatment of acquired programming versus its original programming. That's a whole other can of worms for a different podcast entirely. But I would have liked to have seen a second season. I think it could have been fun to have a sequel. Maybe they bring in some other players. We got a good number of cameos here and there, but obviously the poker world's always evolving. and it's always cool to see new faces or old faces come back. And I still think a show like this could work today. Honestly, I think it'd be. A lot of poker blogs are kind of doing this to a certain extent for usually one person. So imagine, a bit more. I'm sure Poker Go could very easily run out a show like this. I'm surprised they haven't actually.
Yeah, and you can change it around to have it be, now that there's the online WSOP, you can have it be 2 months, 2 bracelets or something, and the focus is on trying to win the tournaments instead of win amount of money or something like that. Yeah, definitely would have been interesting to see a second season just to see how the show would have developed. Would they have, kept up with this sort of, more about the lifestyle of these guys and them riding helicopters through Las Vegas and gambling, how their arcs would have developed, would they have brought in other players? Yeah, it would have definitely been interesting to have seen that. I can understand why this season as a whole didn't work because, who exactly is this supposed to be appealing to, besides just, generic like 18 to 30-year-old white guys? Are poker players supposed to like this because there's not too much poker, Are, crazy people who like to live it up supposed to like it? I don't know.
Well, I'm sure poker pros want as many young amateurs putting their money into the online poker scene so they can profit off them, reeling the fish. But that's kind of the case for the ESPN television programs also, because that's Matt Sowitz said at length, the reason why the ESPN broadcasts were so good is because they brought all the bad players that the good players could make money off them. You know what I'm saying? That's what he would say. So
good mic impression.
A fun little diversion of a show. If you're still on pandemic lockdown, then watch somebody else go on poker lockdown. So.
Yeah, as I mentioned, I do enjoy this show, if semi-ironically, just because it's just, the down to the music, the cinematography, it just all reminds me of just a low-budget G4 show, which, again, both Ben and I grew up on, and, I still like X-Play, so,
Maybe not the current version of it, but
the
classic one, yes. Anyway, that concludes that look back into 2 months, 2 million. And let's get into the good stuff here, or quote unquote good stuff. That'll be to be determined. We have the 2015 World Series of Poker main event. Following up on Martin Jacobson's $10 million win, we have a slightly smaller scale main event in that we have 6,420 players, but a brand new payout structure. Instead of just the top 10%, they wanted to have the goal of the top 1,000 players in the tournament cashing. And that meant that the money from the later payouts had to be kind of like in 07 when they increased the min cash. You had a little bit of a decrease in the top prizes. So first prize was about $7.6 million. So about 25% less than the year prior. Still, again, a lot of money. If someone wins it, they're gonna be happy. But still a slightly different payout structure for this main event, and they've kind of kept ever since. They've made tweaks, but they made from a top 10 placement to a top 15% of the field cashing. But this was the start of that. Otherwise, the broadcast of on ESPN was fairly comparable. I would say stylistically it's very different, but mechanically and technically it's very much the same. We have recurring bits again, and but then more ads, sadly.
Right. Yeah.
And I'll ask you this. I felt that this quality-wise is in between 2013 and 2014, if we're talking about recent comparisons.
Yeah, 2013 was toward the bottom of the pile. 2014 was more toward the top. Yeah, I'd say it's toward the middle. One thing you didn't mention was the extended episodes, which, we can get into which one of those episodes were extended, but we go from there being like a 40-minute episode to being over an hour of content, which I think has its benefits and has its detriments. It allows hands to play out a little bit longer, which I think is a good thing because it builds drama and it lets you sort of get inside the players' heads a bit better. On the other hand, sometimes they pad it out with an extra segment that doesn't need to be there. They sort of brought back the mic check segment. They had a Hellmuth segment in the first episode and, kind of sort of tried to bring back these old segments. They bring back the side action championship, replacing Mattisau with Maria Ho. which I liked, but that's, sort of just trying to figure out what exactly the runtime is, how much should, go into each episode is, sort of varies from episode to episode. There's standards for that.
So basically the extra length episodes are 1.5 length of
Right.
a normal episode, which means that even though this main event is 18 episodes, I think if you factor in the extra half here, I think it comes out to more around 20 episodes of total content. And, we had seen final table episodes be double length or extra length. So it's not unheard of to have, this would take up an hour and a half long on the ESPN TV schedule, for example. And it often meant that you'd be watching just one episode that week instead of watching, 2 1-hour time slot episodes back to back. So it accomplished the same thing. I'm sure that was partially because of, one, the number of weeks they needed the main event episode structure to play out leading up to the final table, and as well as they might have had just more content for that particular level of the tournament that they wanted to show on screen. And also, there is a main character, a definitive de facto main character of 2015, and that is, of course, Daniel Negreanu. He makes it is tied for his best run, but really it's his best run in the main event of all time, compared to 2001 when there was fewer players. And again, I have a lot to say about the edit, the focus, the pacing, the direction of this entire main event. But it is good to see him kind of front and center, even though it's kind of like front and center, but off to the side a bit, because he's not always the primary focus of any one episode. Really, he's kind of almost in he's kind of like the third lead of an episode of a television drama. Not quite the lead sometimes, but he's front billing on the opening sequence and stuff. So
yeah, that's a good analogy. I like that. Yeah. I mean, we get a lot of interesting characters. I mean, right off the bat in the first episode, we get Budaroni, who is also a first timer. So we have the first timer segment come back. Josh Beckley, also another first timer. So both of them get a lot of attention right away, and we get a sense of who their personalities are. Obviously, we have Kelly Minkin. She sort of comes in toward the later parts of the season. We'll get to her later on. And then Mr. Justin Schwartz, I think, not too much content toward the first half of the season. He sort of appears later on, but we start to get a little bit of a mix of him right off the bat. I like all these characters. I think it's a good mix.
I mean, there's some good characters. I think that the problem is, I think a lot of the side-by-side comparisons of 2014, this main event suffers because I don't think the first timers is quite as effective. I don't think the side action championship is nearly as good as the year prior. I don't think that the highlighted like table talk character fight element is quite as strong as 2014. Reistad and Karenin takes the cake over Justin Schwartz, I think, still. But again, we're only talking about the first half here. That's the first 8 episodes, so covering days 4 and 5. We'll cover the last 10 episodes next time. So I guess leading off right in, though, we get a classic bait and switch with these first 2 episodes because Mr. Philip J. Hellmuth Jr. is the main character of these first 2 episodes. And, we're left to we have no reason to believe that he's not going to be making a deep run given the edit he gets. He is by far the spotlight character on in the first half of this day 4 coverage. And unfortunately, this main event, it begins on day 4, and this is post-bubble burst. And not only that, this is after a good third of the field that min-cashed is already gone. So it's not even like just post-bubble. This is like well into that first initial wave of lots of bust-outs on that first sort of level or so of the tournament once the bubble was burst. So that was a bit of a letdown for me.
Yeah, I mean, I love seeing the bubble. I mean, we talk about this every single episode, it seems, but I just love the natural tension that comes through. I love all that. So, yeah, I mean, it's okay, just get into the action. You have Phil Hellmuth for a couple episodes. But on the other hand, I wouldn't have mind, just seeing a little bit of details about that.
Yeah, and additionally, Negreanu was kind of in this episode on the outer tables, he, a couple of spots here and there. But my biggest issue with day 4, this first 4 batch, is it spreads the action so thin.
Yeah.
They spend so much time just spotlighting these random people, a lot of women characters, women players, which is fine, but they don't make a particularly deep run. The ones that are shown, they don't really last much into day 4, really. And it really just slows the pace down and maybe like 5 or 6 people are shown in like 3 or 4 hands each across these first few episodes. And really, because they're not going to leave much of an impact as the tournament winds down, it just seems like a lot of waste time for me.
Yeah, I mean, it's okay to do it for a couple people. Like they have this 94-year-old player who gives the shuffle up and deal, and he has a great line. He goes, "I didn't come here to lose," as he sits back down. It's okay to do that for a couple people, but I'm with you. Yeah, I mean, give a little bit more time to Joe McKeon pops up. Give a little bit more time to him. Give a little bit more time to Negreanu and Hellmuth and develop them further.
Yeah. And much like 2014, we still do not have a defined table 2 in the studio of the poker room. They have, again, they kind of have semi-featured outer tables, less so than in 2014, really. Just, they might latch onto one particular player if there's action at that table. But for the most part, we have the primary table 1, and then just kind of whoever they can get in the outer tables that draws their attention. And again, this first episode is a top-notch Hellmuth episode.
Mm-hmm.
There's a variety pack of players at the rest of the tables. And I don't mind for the very first episode of the main event doing that, but it's when you go back a third, fourth, fifth time to these players in episodes 2, 3, 4, where it just kind of drags on for me.
Yeah, I'm with you. Absolutely.
But again, this is a Hellmuth variety pack of fun. We have lots of great lines from Hellmuth, the old "I'll tip this one into the next one" line. Hellmuth kind of had a middling stack for this, for day 4, really the entire day. But he gets a lot of mileage out of, playing, pretty aggressive with some of his mediocre cards. And for the most part, it works out for him. And of course, my highlight of this episode is the last hand, where Hellmuth outplays Jay Kim on his right with 7 high, with some of the best legal, not annoying speech play you'll ever see.
Yeah, I mean, Hellmuth is just in top form here. I mean, just so many great lines. I mean, I think my favorite line might have to be, "Too often I deserve $1 million in chips and I'm right." I just love that line. It just summarizes him so much. But yeah, that last hand is just excellent. And Kim talks back to him multiple times in different hands. And Lon and Norm try to hype him a little bit as this great character. I don't think he's a great character, but yeah, I mean, I really like his interactions with Hellmuth throughout that last hand. It's very good.
Yes. And, really, I think another one of the main characters in this first, batch of episodes is Antonio Esfandiari.
Yep.
He gets, a fair amount of attention, arguably more than Negreanu does in the first couple of episodes. He's a very energetic, talkative, and usually solid player. Again, he's still coming off of his infamous 1-drop appearances at this point. Obviously, winning it in 2012 and then kind of blowing up in 2014. So, he's always in front of the camera, entertaining. And we actually watched this first episode together just to kind of start off a new season on a joint foot. And I think you'll probably agree with me. I think that this first part definitely works better in conjunction with part 2.
Yes.
Just kind of, again, this is how it would have aired on ESPN in the first place. But I think, again, it's a good 2-act structure with Hellmuth, and that plays a factor in watching this.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it's fine. I mean, again, as I mentioned, we get McKeon, we get also Kenny Howard, we get some other people who are going to show up later on. So, we're starting to build their characters a little bit. McKeon, of course, has a set, which kind of just sets the tone for his entire treatment in 2015. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I wish it had been a little bit less of a grab bag style.
So then part 2, the blinds starting to escalate again, 3K and 6K. Hellmuth kind of gets his quotation introduction sort of montage at the start, and then he actually gets the entire table ice cream in a pretty amusing scene that you don't often see on these episodes.
It's very sweet, yeah.
And then Negreanu, after kind of having this table breaking curse throughout day 4, he actually gets moved to fill Hellmuth's table in the most epic meeting of the minds since 2008's Metasau Hellmuth day 5 adventure. And, we got some good table talk between the two of them before they even are in a hand together. So that's always fun. Negreanu, again, was playing at a pretty high level. We see him fold top pair versus a set, which honestly, looking at that guy's face when he made that raise and respond to him, I will probably do the same thing as well.
Absolutely. Oh, yeah. I mean, come on.
And then, Hellmuth, who had been gradually on the rise, chip count, plays a hand against Cloud, who we saw briefly, I believe it was in 2013 with Bill Brunson, I think, on day 4.
Yeah,
so,
I think you're right.
he makes a bit of all singles, which again I just love those having a lot of small denomination chips. So I totally respect that bet style.
Yeah, it's good.
And so, a lot of the first timers get spotlighted briefly in the this first timers bit. I kind of think it's cheating to have Fedor Holz be in there, because it doesn't really feel like a first timers to me, even though maybe it was first main event. So, like, that kind of always rubbed me the wrong way.
Yeah, I mean, in 2015, he was already like a phenom, and obviously as time's gone on, his reputation skyrocketed. I mean, yeah. It's not fair to compare Fedor Holz to Peter Brown or somebody else who's like never played a tournament before.
Yeah. That did a lot to kind of delegitimize the first timers bit for me, as they just kept harping on Holtz. Like, he's not really a first timer. Like, I feel like a first timer, the spirit of that is supposed to be someone it's like their first like poker tournament, or if it's not quite that, it's close to it.
Yeah, I mean, it is interesting to hear that more human side of him, talking about navigating through the field and, sometimes being a little nervous about it. And then, we get good perspective on how he plays. But I'm with you. He's not a first timer. He doesn't count.
Yeah. And so, again, I think the table 1 action early on here on day 4 is pretty solid, with Hellmuth getting angry more than he's not angry. Our table actions, very forgettable for the most part, besides at least showing us a number of faces, who the chip leader is and whatnot here and there. But again, once again, the best hand of the episode is the last hand of the episode. It's as epic as it gets. I mean, I remember when the poker, this term was happening live in 2015. I was like, oh my god, at the same table, and I couldn't believe that this big flip, ace king against queens, was actually happening between these two guys of all people at the first table.
Yeah, and Hellmuth busts, and he takes it well. Shakes Negreanu's hand. Obviously, they're friends. And he interviews Kara Scott after the fact, and mentions how Negreanu got lucky, and he doesn't blame Negreanu because Negreanu's so scared of him he can only take a flip against him to try to beat him, which I thought was funny. Yeah, I mean, it's a shame that Hellmuth couldn't run deep, but on the other hand, yeah, I mean, queen's in that spot. I think you just got to put it in.
Not to mention, an ace and a king were both folded pretty flat by somebody else, so really Hellmuth had the heavier half of the coin flip going in, and it still gets pretty unlucky to not come back and take the hand. And also just the fact that he had fewer chips to begin the hand in the start. I mean, it's okay to lose a flip if you want to get more chips, but
yep,
D-Neg had a pretty good stack at that point, and it only got bigger once he won that hand.
Absolutely.
And so as Hellmuth exits, our real main character, Negreanu, emerges. And though, again, Negreanu, he will be at the featured table the entire main event. The rest of the time, and it's kind of almost an overdose of them, because I feel like we don't get like 18 episodes worth of content, like of good D-Neg content. Like, I feel like if you made an abridged version of the main event, you would cut out so much of the D-Neg fluff, because not all of it is all that spectacular.
You're right. Yeah, I mean, it's also a little unfair to him, I think, to keep him at the feature table and have his game, be able to be picked apart by these people. I mean, they've mentioned in recent years, the whole, last woman standing thing, how unfair it is to the woman being highlighted. I mean, you have to say the same thing about Negreanu here. I mean, shift him around a little bit.
Now, especially when you have, 100 tables left plus or whatever of players, as the number of tables shrink down to single digits, etc. You're like, well, you can move to an outer table just for a little bit. It's ridiculous. And obviously table draw is a big deal. So how that will happen as everything winds down will be relevant. But really, I mean, moving on to episode 3, because I think this is the editing for this episode is very odd, because the first third of this episode is entirely the first table. The second third is only the outer table, and then the last third is a mixture of both. Like, I feel like there is definitely more of a intentional directing at work, and it didn't always work for me, especially with all these players on the outer tables that I just didn't care for. Like the Rileys, okay, they're married, they're both there, but they would just show these kind of forgettable hands and then cut back later. Oh, she's lost half her chips since we last saw her. Let's see how she does now. She went a few chips back. Like, that's just not very satisfying.
Yeah, I mean, we get a segment from Negreanu sort of talking about his lifestyle, how he's, has a trailer and he has vegan smoothies and so on. We get an interesting segment from Esfandiari about being a celebrity and how his fame amount is amount. So those are both sort of good moments from them. And then, yeah, we get this sort of grab bag of all these different players. Phil Locke makes a brief appearance, busting with ace king versus aces. Bad play. I'm with you on that one. Yeah. We get this field hockey player. I'm about to butcher her name. Fatima Morena de Malo.
Yes.
I think it's close enough. She gets a segment dedicated to her, as well as a bunch of other stuff, a bunch of other hands. And, she does okay, but I have to wonder, like, why specifically her and not Lily Newhouse or one of these other players who was in the running here. Some stuff from Cloud we get, just a grab bag of different stuff here.
Yeah, and really, I mean, compared to 2014, I remember they had that bizarre second episode day 4 where they just merged like the whole day into one episode.
Right.
This content, I feel like it could have been excised, but I guess because they had Daniel Negreanu, they wanted just to have as much good content while they could, because they didn't know when he was going to bust. They wanted to highlight him being in this tournament and making a deep run of a lot of chips.
Yeah, I mean, it's just. Yeah, it's just kind of an odd grab bag of different things. I mean, I just don't think it quite works. I mean, it's not necessarily boring per se. Again, we have these little moments where we do learn a little bit more about these other players, and I think it's okay to have a grab bag sometimes. But especially after the previous 2 episodes also having kind of a grab bag feel, it just feels like a little bit too much of everything. Whereas, you need to have a mixture of some episodes focused on specific players and then some that are more grab bag.
And then, as we go into episode 4, the last part of day 4, for me, the highlight here is Esfandiari's table.
Right, yeah.
Esfandiari both being involved in some hands, but also possibly the most hilarious side bet inducing action in a poker hand of all time, where this guy Mamutsky faced him all in on the river with a set of 5s, ends up folding when he had narrowed his opponent's range down to ace, king, or kings, which would have been top 2 pair or second sets. And Esfandiari and Rajkumar, who we've seen here and there the last couple of years,
right, yeah,
are trying to have like a $5,000 side bet of what the other guy has. So for the side bet to actually play out, he has to actually show his cards so that they can pay off the bet. And so when Kamutsky sees that he made the wrong fold, he goes crazy. He would have had like a million chips or something like that, and so he left with like a quarter of that. And Esfandiari is like trying to make him feel better, but is also just kind of happy that he got the side bet win. And then Mamutsky sits back down and says, "What was the bet?"
Yeah, it's a great moment. I mean, Antonia's like, it's pretty hard to make a set, like kind of not quite needling him, but also not quite comforting him either. Like, Esfandiari is very good at that, just treading the line between needling and not needling.
He's got it nailed down.
Yeah. By the way, one thing we didn't mention was the players analysis is back with Locke and Esfandiari. But because Esfandiari is still in the tournament, they only have Locke doing it, which I thought was kind of an interesting little choice there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it's fun. And then episode 4 is where a lot of those outer table characters are actually busting. So that's Joe Hashem, who again just kind of pops up on the montage of, oh, he's still in, hey, yeah,
right.
And then Fatima. Both Rileys by this point, these guys going out. And again, it's like, why show a few kind of lame outer table hands for which we didn't even see the full action of? They just wanted to show a hand for the sake of having this person be shown on camera winning a hand, even though they're going to be gone, less than a day's time. So again, I'm not a fan of that much time of these early episodes going towards that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm with you. I mean, I did find it funny seeing Kroon mess around with 7-3. It's always nice to see Mark Kroon.
Kroon is the main character of the outer tables in the. Yeah. Besides Esfandiari, maybe those two kind of join that role together for the first half of the main event. And again, it's pretty fun to watch them do their thing. And again, with once again, Esfandiari, Negreanu, and Hellmuth focus. This is kind of the last gasp of these old school players being, semi deep in the event, because this is actually Negreanu and Hellmuth's most recent main event cash. Esfandiari will make a couple of solid runs going forward, but these guys, they haven't been able to have any sort of recent success in this tournament so much recently. So again, this is the last we'll be seeing them in a substantial role for a while. So again, it's kind of their last hurrah of sorts.
Very true. Yeah.
And Esfandiari does get a great kind of running gag of him always having the worst hands when the money goes in and coming out okay in the end. It's really the only outer table action of this entire day 4 stretch that had any sort of narrative resonance for me.
Yeah.
Because even though it's Esfandiari kind of takes a hit there, takes a bunch back, does this, and it's just kind of fun to see him kind of, goes ups and downs.
He shoves with 10-6. Rajkumar calls him with King Jack, and Esfandiari gets there. I mean, he's a magician. He pulls those rabbits out of his hat.
Yeah. So ultimately, a mostly good first half, a weaker second half of day 4.
Mm-hmm.
Again, could have been better, but I understand that. Again, this is all subjective. I mean, obviously, if this was brand new to you and you weren't watching this on rewatch, maybe you'd think differently. But
right.
I would say one very solid hands in 3 out of 4 episodes to watch, and from there, it's just good Hellmuth highlight reel.
Quite right, yeah.
So as day 4 ends, we get day 5 with 237 players left. So again, a little under 1/4 of who actually made the money. Again, Daniel Negreanu, about 1.3 million in chips. So again, chipping up steadily as the tournament goes on. Outer tables, again, given who was left from who was shown as day 4 was winding down, Max Steinberg does emerge out of nowhere. He kind of will be one of the most oddest, quiet like chip leader edits you'll ever see. Like he'll just later on just be randomly in the chip lead. We don't see him accumulate chips at all, even though we had seen so much of that in 2013.
And he has the greatest posture of any poker player of all time. Like Norm makes like 15 jokes about how he's going to jump out of his seat. It's just so funny to see him just like this the whole time.
Yeah. Other people that come across, Joe McKeon being the chip leader on day 5, he'll be kind of in that chip lead role, kind of like how Jacobson was kind of the chip leader for a lot of the year prior. So again, it goes to show that even though we joke about how the chip leader on day blank kind of goes out in a place of glory, some of the top players really can continue to maintain that top chip stack for the last half of the tournament.
Very true, yeah.
Other characters emerge. Justin Bonamo starts to kind of come. This is kind of just before his epic 4-year run in the poker scene where he was just crushing every single high stakes, high roller tournament. So again, still a top pro at this time, but again, the height of his power, he's still on the upswing to reach that hill that he'll be on the poker world.
Very
and
true.
Again, some more really good Esfandiari stuff where he shoves 9-7 and Norm asks, how many big blinds did he have left? He had 16. What a donkey he is. It's just how blunt and direct that statement was just, to me, so funny.
And Klinger calls with ace queen, and Esfandiari gets it through. I mean, just what a guy. I mean, wow.
Yeah. And then even after a solid double up for Esfandiari, he ends up busting to the alien, the legend, Neil Blumenfield. And you have to wonder if this was the reason why Esfandiari went on the Blumenfield train for the final table edit, because this is who he busted to. And Blumenfield is the coolest, slickest, most badass, hipster, old guy look of all time. This main event is the year of the oldster player. Blumenfield being one of the guys as part of that movement, and this sort of is our introduction to Neil Blumenfield here on episode 5.
Yeah, I mean, he shoves kings into aces. I mean, that's just what happens. Hands play themselves. But yeah, just a little taste of Blumenfeld right at the end here, just popping up out of nowhere, which kind of makes it more effective. You just see Esfandiari bust, and it's this guy with a hat and a scarf and sunglasses. Like, who the heck is this guy? It's a good way of sort of suggesting it.
Yeah. And the only other observation I really have is they use this odd graphic of bluffed 25% of stack on river when Negreanu makes a river bluff. It was a very odd choice. And you actually did one other graphic later on where they show when someone wins a pot, they say plus 200,000 chips, and they'll put how many big blinds that is.
Right.
So he's next to it, or they'll do plus or minus. Very bizarre. And they only use those once or twice each. So I thought it was very strange to even use it at all like that.
Yeah, I know. It's a little weird.
Yeah,
it's not a big deal, but yeah, it's definitely an odd note.
But I mean, again, besides the Esfandiari content, again, I thought this was another kind of dull episode. I didn't think the table one action was really memorable. We did get Peshta Silva and Chad Power at the same table as Negreanu, but really didn't really interest me too much.
Yeah, I mean, a couple little lines are kind of nice. Negreanu talks to this guy Van op Zeeland and goes, "Are you from the Netherlands? You have the Amsterdam thing going on." Just a couple of cute little lines here and there, but yeah, nothing really to hang your hat on.
And then they actually skip a whole level before the next episode because it opens with Negreanu being a short stack, and he's kind of like shown paying off a bet from a previous hand, but we actually miss when he lost like over half his stack. And so it really puts a damper on our ability to really watch that narrative of the ups and downs of the main events. It almost felt as if they were afraid to show him losing a pot because he actually chips up considerably in this episode, the middle part of day 5. But part of what makes the rises so momentous in the main event is seeing the declines that come before them.
Quite right. Yeah.
For our main character. So that really hurts the narrative drive of this episode for me.
Yeah, I'm with you. Yeah, I mean, that's it. I didn't know that he lost a lot of his chips. Wow, that's weird.
Well, he had 1.3 million as episode 5 began, and begins episode 6 with about 500,000.
Do you know what happened? How did he lose it?
We aren't shown. We aren't shown it.
Yeah. You didn't. Okay, you didn't look at the hand histories or anything and see what happened?
I only look at that for day 7 onward.
Okay, that's fair enough. Yeah, that's weird that they wouldn't mention that, at least just in passing.
So they showed that, like, oh, Negreanu's been giving away chips recently. He's down to 19 big blinds. But again, I would have liked to have seen some of those hands play out. I mean, we'll see plenty of him losing on day 7. So why couldn't we have seen him losing on day 5 too?
Yeah, that's a strange decision. Yeah.
And really, this episode is highlighted by 2 big Negreanu all-ins and 1 good fold by him. So he wins 1 flip, 1 70-30, and 1 folds queens at one point.
Yeah.
And so that's, again, really by the best Negreanu featured table content since his bust out of Hellmuth. The rest of the hands in between have kind of been forgettable. Win a few chips here, but nothing really all that viral or crazy. So that was good to have. But again, it's just mostly an episode, and even the side action championship didn't do much for me in this one.
Yeah, I mean, the highlight of this episode for me was the Rapiki versus Schwartz hand, where Rapiki shoves with pocket tens, Schwartz calls with jacks, and talk about a clash in demeanor between the two. Rapiki's sort of the amateur, a little bit more gregarious. He says, "Gator Man called it again. My inner Stu Unger is coming out." And Schwartz is fuming. Like, you can just tell he's fuming about the beat. But, they managed to have a fist bump, which is nice. But, like, that's just like a funny end to me.
Well, Schwartz gets too outed, and then he says, "I'm happy for you," even though we know it's not ingenuous whatsoever. Because he's like talking to the camera, like, "You guys know me at home. I call those river cards. I do that." And then he's just like, I always get too out at the worst time. Like, "I'm happy for you. You had your bid all day." That's really there had been 1 earlier hand with Justin Schwartz against Beckley that was, fine. It just wasn't super memorable. It was a good table setting hand, I guess. But so again, we get a little taste of Schwartz here. We get a little Stern versus McKeon, ironically, which wouldn't have expected because they'll be the top 2 stacks at the final table, and they didn't really square off much at that table, ironically. So I guess we have to make up for it by having it happen here in day 5.
Yeah, that is funny to note, isn't it?
Yeah. So we're zooming in by here, but really, I just didn't think that these episodes really were super impactful. Besides a little bit of Esfandiari here and there. Now he's gone, so that's not good.
Yeah.
And then episode 7 is the third part of day 5. The blinds up so that we no longer have those lovely little 1K yellow chips anymore. And this is our very first bonus length episode of 69 minutes or 1.5 hours in the ESPN time slot on the channel roster. And it's one of the better episodes of the season, but I didn't think it really needed the extra length.
Yeah, I mean, I'm with you. I mean, just in terms of what we see, we see Neuville for the first time, busting a player. Not too much about him, just sort of comes up. We get a little bit more from Minkin. We get obviously a lot more from Negreanu. Mark Kroon makes some appearances. Blumenfield has sort of his first interview with the camera talking about it. So yeah, I mean, we get some more character development here. The poker just isn't super exciting any which way.
I mean, there's a couple of okay hands. The very first hand we show is Ace King beating aces. That's always kind of exciting.
Yeah,
better tables. Negreanu kind of discusses like the subconscious ways of chip riffling and having like a side bit with Phil Ivey about, you're pretending to pot, then all of a sudden you are touching chips and it happens. So it's kind of funny, I guess, those little bits. But because this is a kind of an episode, kind of is our first true introduction to Newville, to Fedor Holz, to Blumenfield. They'd been shown briefly here and there, but really we get to see them more at work in this episode. Steinberg, of course, being the chip leader,
right.
One of the most silent edits of all time. I mean, we saw him on one hand 2 episodes ago making a good call 3-way on the river with the best hand, but really not a ton. Really, for me, there's some great hands though with Mark Kroon, kind of being Mark Kroon, dueling out with Nick Alberisk here and there. So it's some good Mark Kroon style poker, including again some great interaction with the dealer, where he says, "I'll do a cartwheel naked if you catch me bluffing." The dealer chimes in, "That's binding." And he cartwheel. He goes, "Dealer, dealer."
Just so crazy. I mean, Kroon with Queen 5 against Moreno with the boat. I mean, what the heck? Like, ugh.
Well, you have that, and then you have a great 9-4 bluff where he just confidently turns the cards over. And then Hellmuth had been, after his bust, had kind of become his coach for the main event, and he just chimes in because he kind of breaks the spectator protocol and walks on near the table, and he goes, "Step on him, raise every hand, and every time they 3-bet you 4-bet." It's just good stuff, and I wish I had the balls to play like Mark Kroon, just playing on each 2 cards. He accumulates a lot of chips by this point in the tournament, so it's very impressive stuff, even though after he kind of bluffs off a lot of it with the Queen 5, but it's good stuff.
I would never be able to play like him. I'm so tight. I just can't do it.
And then we get the first spouting of the phrase, "What is with that tank top?" at the same table as Mark Kroon. This guy, Augustino, has this bizarre tank top that I would never wear personally, that acquires much attention from Lon and Norm in the booth. But
I tried them.
And again, really the best poker-ish hand in this episode is a big Fedor Holz Pesh to Silva hand, where Fedor goes big, goes for a big bluff with like bottom pair on a very, 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 very scary board, where De Silva makes a very lengthy decision-making process where he makes the hero call all in with 1 pair, top pair in this case, but 1 pair on a board that has flush and straights out there, and anything's possible with your opponent's hand, and he makes a big call and has a huge stack with that good call.
Yeah, I mean, it's great. And again, they really let the hand play out. We see the action on each street. We see, Negreanu calling the clock. We hear them interact afterward. De Silva takes it well, talking with Negreanu. I mean, it's a great hand. It really is.
This hand is a good example of the pros of this sort of editing style of allowing hands to play out, giving them the time to play out. So you've got both the action and the post-mortem of that hand at the table.
Right.
Because so often, okay, big hand happens. Okay, cut away, next table, bye. And we actually get some of that in this episode, so that was good to have.
Very nice, yeah.
And again, this is also, the episode where a lot of the final tablists kind of will emerge, will enter the spotlight for, going forward. So it's like, again, it's a very important table setting episode for the final table. I just didn't think it needed to be the full 69 minutes long. It could have been maybe a little bit tighter and been the 45-minute, but
I'm with you. Absolutely.
But it's still in the top half of this first batch episode. So
yeah.
I won't complain too much.
Absolutely.
And then episode 8, the final portion of day 5, with 88 players left, 2 women, blinds 20K, 40K. Again, the same featured table as before: Negreanu, Blumenfield, Fedor Holz, Chad Power, Pesh de Silva, Matt Jarvis, who we know from his final table appearance in 2010, Bob Buckenmeyer, who was a final 2 tableist in 2012. So again, we have some pretty good stuff on this featured table as far as the players left, and again, we have a purging of the outer tables with a lot of bust-outs happening as the action winds down as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's really sort of Kelly Minkin comes into focus in this episode. We get a segment about her working as a lawyer and how poker actually gives her sort of an advantage as a lawyer. Managed to pick up aces, double up, gets ace 10, shoves, folds around. So we're starting to sort of see her emerge a little bit. We get an interesting hand between Negreanu and Blumenfield. Negreanu with aces, Blumenfield with jacks. So we both sort of get a sense of how Blumenfield plays a little bit more, checking, managing to sort of cut his losses a little bit, even though he does call a big, raise pre-flop. But yeah, he manages to cut his losses and not lose too much money. So we're starting to get like a little bit more life, a little bit more characterization for these players, which is nice. Even though, I would have liked maybe to have seen a little bit more from Neuville, especially because he starts the episode off as the chip leader with 6 million chips, which is very, very decent stack. Steinberg starts off the episode 5th in chips with 4.5 million. Again, I would have liked to have seen more from him, but we are sort of slowly getting there in terms of characterization.
Yeah, and, Matt Waxman, who was, again, in the final 5 tables or 6 tables in 2014, making a repeat deep run, always good to see. We get our second, what is with the tank top from Norm for Augustino, who he actually gets busted by Patrick Kearney, who we'll see going forward. One of those painful small pairs flipping. It's just a sick feeling when you're that deep, under 100 left in the main event, and you just can't win one more flip to keep moving on.
Right, yeah.
There was a pretty amusing Mark Kroon, Kelly Minkin table back and forth where Minkin, wins a couple of hands, and Mark Kroon's trying to get her to show her cards. And, she's it's just a fun little neighborly sort of, rivalry developing there, even though and that will pay off on day 6, actually. So that's kind of cool to see that begins there. Nick Alberisk, who was the victim of many Mark Kroon hand game plays, ends up busting in a very brutal flush versus flush situation. I mean, that's compared to set over set, I thought that's almost grosser than set over set sometimes.
Oh yeah.
I mean, obviously a flush beats a set, but I mean, when you literally have 2 of the suit that you have a flush with, you just don't expect to have to say run into 2 more of them. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Always worse.
Yeah. But again, the highlight for me for this episode was the Blumenfield Matt Jarvis hand, where Blumenfield doesn't go broke, although I think Lon kind of pats him on the back a little bit too much for not going broke, because really, I think, yes, he didn't go too crazy post river, but he should have folded the river anyway. So,
I think so, yeah.
So Blumenfield, again, he had a decent stack for a lot of the day. Then he joins the feature table and then takes some pretty big lumps. The hand actually plays out where Jarvis has 2 6s and Blumenfield has 2 kings. Jarvis flops a set. He gets raised on the flop, and then they both check the queen turn, and then the ace. There was an ace river, or was it on the?
I think it was, yeah. I think.
Yeah, and then Blumenfield pays off a big bet on the river. I don't understand what Neil was thinking as far as calling that big a bet on the river with an overcard on the board, plus God knows what else Jarvis could have.
Yeah, I mean, Blumenfeld bets 250 on the flop, and Jarvis makes it 635. Okay, you could call there, I guess. That's fine. But, I mean, that should indicate to you that Jarvis has some sort of a hand. And then, yeah, an ace on the river, and Jarvis leads out for 820K, and you don't have a big stack behind to really cover that. Yeah, I mean, I would have folded.
I mean, what does Jarvis call pre-flop with that he's just not going to have something by the river? I mean, I'm just not sure what Neil put him on. That's my main problem is when we see these players make these awful calls, it all comes down to what bad hand is this other person playing that they got to this point in the hand and will continue to bet big with. Sometimes you have to work your back, take your time and think about it before you make a bad call. But that blow to Blumenfield will kind of sink him as day 6 starts, but he'll obviously rebound as the tournament continues. At one point during this hand, though, he actually takes his hat off, and Norms chimes in, well, he's going to put the hat back on. He's not a character. And I completely agree. He's like a whole new person without the hat on.
I know, right?
It's wild.
Yeah. It's funny.
And then Blumenfield does the classic, I call, and then just shoves his chips in like, all right, count him up. There you go. Bye.
Worked out for him in the end, though.
Yeah, it did. He's the John Hasp of 2015, so
that's true.
It does work out for him. So again, I besides that one hand on table 1, that's really the only hand I really cared for in this episode, though. From that table, some decent out of table action, but I thought it was okay-ish episode, but nothing spectacular.
Yeah, I'm with you.
And the episode concludes. There's 69 players left as day 5 ends. So obviously they have day 6, day 7 in the final table going forward. But okay, so summarizing these 8 episodes, what are your thoughts? Do you think? I honestly, I think it's not that great, really. There's maybe 3 episodes that get the benefit of approval, but after that, it's just kind of 5 meh or mediocre episodes.
Yeah, I mean, a grab bag approach lets you see hands that you wouldn't have seen if you're just focusing on Negreanu, Minkin, whatever, right? So, I mean, you get a little bit more sense, I suppose, of what the outer tables are. On the other hand, it makes it feel a little less substantial, each hand. And then when you're extending a couple episodes out to, by 30 minutes, which is a long, long time when you're broadcasting television, and you're not really doing very much with it. Yeah, I mean, I just think they got off on the wrong foot with this one in terms of their editing decisions. The one thing that I can give legitimate praise for is we do get a lot of a sense of who the November Niners are. We're starting to see, McKeon be a big stack throughout, Newville be a big stack throughout. Tom Cannuli pops up at the end of this episode with 5.1 million chips. So it does do a very good job of setting these players up, even though it's kind of hit and miss. We get more from Blumenfield and McKeon than we do from Cannuli and the other players.
Buderoni was a presence with the first timers and a few outer table hands too. He's kind of an exuberant, energetic, youthful character. So I definitely got that vibe from him as well.
Yeah.
Patrick Chan, not so much. Beckley is kind of a stoic, kind of quiet guy. So, we're not going to get too much from this early on yet. Stern, again, we saw a little bit of Maniac Stern against McKeon once. So that's kind of the prelude there. So definitely better than the main event average of highlighting the final table earlier on, and definitely a bit more meaningful. Not just like, oh, here's him in one hand, let's move on to the next guy. A bit more effort putting into that. And I got the vibe that there was definitely a bit more intention behind the edits. They had a goal in mind. They wanted to show all these players a little bit, and then whatever happens. I just didn't always agree with that choice of it, that being the best possible, most entertaining decision. I respect the intention, but I don't love the outcome of it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm with you. I mean, the best hand by far in terms of poker play and excitement is the Holtz versus De Silva hand. We do have a couple other hands here or there that are interesting, but yeah, I mean, I'm with you on that. I mean, I mean, it's just the grab bag just feels a little bit too insubstantial in order to really work moving forward.
If I was going to ascribe the award for MVP of these first 8 episodes, if you'd asked me 7 years ago, I would have said Negreanu. But I don't think too many of the hands he's in are all that impactful. I mean, he busts, a couple of players that are short stacks when he has chips, and he doubles up when he's short, but nothing, that I would put in this, most epic top 10 Negreanu hands of all time, besides maybe the Hellmuth flip. But even then, the hands kind of played themselves, and it was, Negreanu really kind of, maybe you could argue, was more in the wrong than Hellmuth was in that hand. So I don't know if that would be the best, appropriate moniker for that hand. But so again, if I had an MVP, I might even just put, for entertainment value, I might just put Kroon, because it's just so funny to watch that guy at work. But from just solid poker, I don't know, who would you put for your MVP?
Well, if we're talking MVP in terms of character and humor, Kroon, definitely, I'd say. I mean, Hellmuth, he's just in there for 2 episodes and then he's gone. Negreanu is definitely humorous too, and he gets good character, but yeah, Kroon's just, because his poker playing is infused with his character. That's what just makes it so entertaining. In terms of play, do I go De Silva, or I don't know?
I mean, he spends a lot of day 5 giving away chips. That's
true.
My only issue with that. So I don't know. I mean, enough hands are shown to those table 1 players, whether they're shown winning as many as they lose. Really, it's not so obvious that this guy played every hand perfectly, and this guy didn't. So, but it's again it's a tough question. I might just go with even Hellmuth is just so entertaining that even when he makes mistakes, they're entertaining mistakes, and he makes a lot of pretty good folds too. So it's not even like he was winning hands and playing poorly with other hands. So I don't know. I mean, I'm biased too. I love Phil, so it's kind of hard to.
Of course, yeah, no problem.
Yeah. And then as far as looking forward to the second half, we've barely scratched the Schwartz surface. So I'm looking forward to that. I know that when we began this podcast, maybe 2 of the 3 things you were most excited for was the Rystad and Schwartz stories.
Yeah, they're up there, yeah.
So we're hitting these all in consecutive order here. Rystad, Schwartz, and then Hasuf. So we're going 1, 2, 3 of all 3 of them for you. So that'll be good.
I like me a good villain edit. Give me my Russell Hantz.
Yeah. And I guess we almost didn't mention that there's no true song introduction a la the last couple of main events with the Best of My Life song. There is a song that is sort of the spotlighted song. The main lyrics being "I'm on my way," which kind of works into the whole "I'm on my way" as you're going through the tournament. But the song doesn't get used that much really in the introduction, except for on select episodes, and so it didn't work for me as well.
Yeah, I'm with you.
Yeah,
it's boring.
And then I alluded to it at the start, but there's these awful WSOP.com like game ads.
Yeah.
That where like Lon like kind of like almost spectates / like plays a hand like on this app screen. Like, come on. I mean, no one's playing on that stupid game. They're gonna be playing on Party Poker, Poker Stars, Full Tilt, or some other poker website that's actually a substantial software. They're not gonna play on that awful game.
Don't knock it till you try it, then.
Oh, I did. Don't worry, I did. It was awful. And again, those ads are like pretty lengthy. I was pressing the skip button like every 5 seconds. Like, come on, let's move on.
I just picked it.
It was a pain. But
Yeah.
that's the most major product placement in these episodes. But yeah.
Yeah, there's no wild card hand. There's no DraftKings King of the Night, which was useless. So that's gone. But yeah, those ads take like 30 seconds. They just keep going.
So just reflecting on these episodes, I gotta say I'm probably a bit more negative than when I began this podcast. I just think that it was just mediocre, a lot of mediocrity.
Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, well, obviously, again, this is the first half.
Yes.
We'll see, how these storylines play out. Obviously, as we get, fewer and fewer tables, we get sort of a better sense of who these people are, and the tension rises. But yeah, we're off to a mediocre start here. We are.
Mediocre start. I think, again, tension ramp up. It'll get better in the last half. I still think we're better than 2013 for the most part. But again, I just did not care for most of the segments in this season either so far. But there's still time. There's
still plenty of time. Exactly.
I think that concludes our April Fool's Day podcast episode. Thank you for listening, everybody. Again, subscribe, comment, like. Tell us what you like about our podcast. Tell us if you were in any of these tournaments and you want us to. We're happy to have any guests on our show where, we've had some great growth recently on our YouTube channel, and we want to just keep this train rolling while we can.
Yeah, absolutely. Just wanted to give you all an update on the Mind Sports Olympiad. So how they're doing it this year is they're having a Grand Prix, which are online events that are going to take place starting on April 15th. And then they go to May 29th. So they got a lot of events planned. And then they're having a live tournament that's in London in July. So registration has opened for the Grand Prix, so you can sign up for as many events as you want. And each event, there's a few different poker events in each event. They give medals to the top 3 winners. And they have like an overall poker champion based on how well you did, kind of like how the WSOP has their player of the year. And it's all free. One thing to note is that because it's based in London, it's on a London timetable. So their events at 7:30 take place at 2:30 if you're on the Eastern coast. But there's some weekend events, so you can get to those. Keep up with, how we're doing. Go back and watch previous episodes if you'd like and tell us how you feel the show's evolved. If you have any suggestions for content like 2 months, 2 million that we can watch on the podcast, we're both happy to sort of diversify things. You want us to talk about Rounders, we can talk about Rounders. You want us to talk about I Bet You, which was this reality show that Esfandiari and Phil Locke did, which is even cheaper than 2 months, 2 million, if you can believe it. We're happy to watch that too. Any suggestions, feedback, let us know, and we will throw it onto the podcast.
Yeah. And again, next time we'll cover the second half of the 2015 main events, and I'm looking forward to it. And again, we'll probably have that ready to go not too long from now. We're already, mostly through our rewatch of this main event. And
you can almost say we're on our way.
Very true.
Yes.
Anyway, guys, we'll see you next time. Happy April Fool's Day.
Take care, y'all.